Hi, this is Jeff Marshall, President of Heritage Conservancy, taking the opportunity to share with you one of my top 10 projects. And I say that with a little bit of a caveat. This next project is symbolic of several projects that we did, which was a major shift in the strategy that we used in land conservation. The Rapuano Farm is one of four projects in Bucks County, Upper Makefield Township, where we actually got involved with the acquisition of a piece of property. It began with our ongoing relationship with Upper Makefield Township. We had been asked to get involved as a preservation consultant. I had the pleasure of writing their open space plan. Then we were hired to help them implement the plan, and then we helped them have a bond issue passed to raise $15 million for land preservation. And the strategy that we came up with was buy, restrict, and sell. Instead of telling the community that this property should be protected, Heritage Conservancy put their own money on the line and purchased a large farm, and the Rapuano Farm was many millions of dollars, and put restrictions on it and then resold it with a limited amount of development. And that's why we call it a conservation-based development. We decided what part of the land was the most important to preserve. We preserved as much as we could, and we had to do a certain amount of development in order to pay the cost to the property owner. And part of that whole process was getting public funding to put conservation easements on it. So we devalued the properties so that we could resell them at a much lower rate and still preserve, in each case, over 80% of the property. So we did four of these, the Rapuano Farm being one, the Gutman Farm, the Flogi property, and the Rorer property. And as the previous slide said, that resulted in the permanent protection of over 500 acres, that all of which were really in the pipeline for development. And in fact, there were development plans in place for 3 of the 4 properties when we got involved. So the first one we did was the Gutman property in Upper Makefield. The University of Pennsylvania no longer had need for this property, and they were going to sell it. We got involved and we competed against a national builder who wanted to put 60 houses there, and we were able to acquire it, do a limited subdivision, and ended up putting 4 new houses on it. And we're able to preserve almost 200 acres of land. So this was a very challenging time for us. It was a very scary situation. We had to put up millions of dollars for each of these properties. So where would we get the money? What was the cash flow? How could we preserve as much as we could without spending millions of dollars that we just didn't have? And there were other non-monetary issues. We always were worried about the environmental impact, but there were social issues. We didn't want to be perceived as a developer, yet this was the only way that we could preserve these otherwise threatened properties. And as I learned the hard way, there's no one single recipe for success when dealing with land preservation. We were able to save the vast majority of 4 pieces of land where we probably would not have been able to preserve any one of them 100%. And so this is just some scenes showing the farm and the view that would have been, 60 or 70 houses along Wrightstown Road. And as I mentioned, we were involved in the township's open space plan. And this 200 plus acre property located in the geographic center of the township was the keystone of the township's open space plan. No matter what else they preserved, if this property wasn't preserved, a vast majority of the citizens would have felt that the plan was not successful. So in this case, you can see the view from Wrightstown Road on the lower left all the way across over into New Jersey, which many people don't think of as scenic, but it is in fact very scenic. And what you can see is what we ended up doing. We ended up having to put a development in. We worked with a partner, and they put in a number of houses, but the key property as viewed from the main roads and contiguous open space, which is very important when you're preserving farmland in particular, was preserved. And I believe this project was a resounding success. Um, so, as I said, here we go. There's one development plan that had 245 houses to be there. So you can see what we did. And this is, again, the view of a beautiful barn. And this is the view that everybody will see forever as they drive down Wrightstown Road. It is now the development. This is the development you see as you come in off of Highland Road. And our partner, Richard Zavetta, who we could not have done this project without his backing, really helped form a private-public partnership. And as I said, it was a different recipe to preserve the land, and it was, in fact, I think, very successful. And that led to the last project we did before, where the township said, you did such a great job with the Flogi property and the Gutman property and the Rapuano property. Would you get involved with this other property? And the Rorer property is also located up for Mayfield. And you can see there is a by right plan, which means the property owners were entitled to this without going through any variances. If they wanted to do a cluster development, they could have put in 218 units. And while minimizing houses isn't the conservation success, preserving all the open space around these buildings is the preservation success. And at the end of the day, we ended up with this plan. But I take it back. We started out with this as our conservation alternative, and we realized because of the expense of subdivision and land development, which we had to pay like any other property owner, we ended up putting a 10th residential lot on the property. But by, I think, any stretch of the imagination, we were able to preserve the vast majority of the land for future generations. And again, we have been accused of having a tainted success in the sense of that it wasn't preserved in its entirety. But this property was in an estate. It was offered for sale. We had competition from numerous residential developers. And I believe that at the end of the day, virtually everyone would have preferred this option to any other. So again, this was transformational for our organization, that we actually spent our money and protected land, and really became a pattern used by a number of developers throughout Bucks County in Upper Mayfield, Solebury, and other communities. So we were able to do a lot of good, and it is, again, for that reason, one of the more memorable projects, because it was such a difficult and stressful project because we had so much money on the line. It aged me many years. So with that, we'll go on to another less stressful project.